We would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. The year is 1789. It's November, and Thomas Jefferson, after spending 4 years in Paris as the United States Minister to France, returns at last to the newly formed American Republic. However, upon arriving, he notices something very unusual. America has changed. The people go about their business with a particular idleness, and safety and liberty is now taken for granted. Philadelphia especially is much different. Where before it was teeming with the chat of revolution, spoken in the language of iconoclasm, now the air is one of money, tax, and governance. Jefferson felt that, in some sense, America was a different nation now than it had been when he left it. But how could it be different? The land was as it had been before, the people were for the most part the same, and yet for Jefferson, its identity was unmistakably other. We have all undoubtedly had moments in our lives similar to this, where we have gone back to familiar places which now feel different or alien to us. Maybe a new feature has been erected there. Maybe it's notably aged. Maybe it's even been renamed. Whatever the cause, sometimes we just think that the spirit of the thing is not what it was before. This makes us ask the question, is it really the same place? Or is it somehow different? And from which, what kind of factors are important to something's identity? As is often the case in philosophy, this question harkens back to the ancient Greeks, more particularly to the Greek hero Theseus. Theseus, through pioneering the early Synechismos movement, is widely recognised as the founder hero of Athens, as well as the venerable slayer of the Minotaur. Despite these heroics, however, one of the most interesting elements of his story turns out to be something so innocuous as his ship. But Miles, you may ask, what could be so important about a ship? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. The ship wherein Theseus and the youth of Athens returned from Crete had 30 oars, and was preserved by the Athenians down even to the time of Demetrius Phalereus, for they took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timber in their places, documents the Greco-Roman biographer Plutarch. This ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical question of things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other contending that it was not the same. So over the years, the ship's timber is slowly replaced piece by piece until eventually every oar is different and there are no original parts of the ship remaining. The question is, at what point does the ship lose its identity? To help us out, we'll characterise 4 distinct models of the ship, each respective to a different stage in its repairs. Ship 1 will be the original ship returning from Crete. Ship 2 is the ship after one of its 30 oars has been replaced. Ship 3, where half of the oars have been replaced. And Ship 4, where every piece of timber is new and no original piece remains. Thinking of it in such a way will help us better visualise the relevant stages. So, using the key we've just constructed, what are your intuitions? Does Ship 2, for example, still have claim to be the Ship of Theseus? There's only the difference of 1 oar between it and Ship 1. How important is a single oar? Enough to make it a different ship? What about Ship 3? Half of the oars are different, but half still remain. What proportion of original parts does there need to be in order for it to remain the same ship? Suppose we say 50% for instance. By this view, Ship 2 equals Ship 1 because they share at least half of the same oars. Likewise, Ship 3 is the same as Ship 2 because they share half the same oars. And Ship 4 is the same as Ship 3 for they share half the same oars as each other, the replacement oars. Each ship has at least half the same oars as the previous ship. But here's the strange part. If we say this, then Ship 4 has to be the same ship as Ship 1, due to something known as the transitivity of identity. This is a property relation within logic, but put simply it means if A equals B and B equals C, then A has to equal C. If you don't want to commit to Ship 4 being the Ship of Theseus, we have to decide where to draw the line instead. By the way, if you're finding this conceptually challenging, don't worry, because that's kind of the point. Scenarios like the Ship of Theseus are, in a way, designed as intuition pumps, to borrow Daniel Dennett's description. Their job is to gauge your intuitions towards the nature of identity, and work out what approaches you'll be more inclined towards as a result. As for these approaches, they're found within the field of Myriology, the theory of parthood relations. Broadly speaking, there are two main approaches within Myriology to the Ship of Theseus problem. The first is that of Myriological Essentialism. This holds that each part of an object persists by necessity, meaning that a thing is the totality of its parts. If an object were to lose a part, it ceases to be the same object and becomes something else entirely. Accordingly, a Myriological Essentialist would believe that Ship 1, the original ship, is a completely different object from Ship 2, which in turn is different from Ship 3. It's called Myriological Essentialism because for someone who is convinced by this approach, every part of a thing is essential. But there is a slight problem with it in that everything changes over time, even if the change is gradual or tiny. As the poet Ovid remarked, dripping water hollows out stone, not through force, but through persistence. According to Myriological Essentialism, the Statue of Liberty of today, for instance, is a totally different object than the one which existed in 1920. This is due to the small damages it suffered over the years and the gradual chipping away of its copper, both resulting in the loss of infinitesimal parts. Depending on how atomic the Myriological Essentialist treats their parts, this might count as a loss of identity. But calling them different entities seems quite unintuitive. It certainly looks like it's the same object. We certainly think of them as the same thing. At the very least, we can say that we intuit a continuity. The Myriological Essentialist, though, has an answer to this objection. The Statues of Liberty are different, but they bear enough of a resemblance for us to think of them as the same, for the sake of convenience. Likewise, Ship 2, for example, is similar enough to Ship 1 for us to practically call it the same ship, even though they believe that it's ultimately not. If you feel that each part is important and that any changes to the ship alters its identity, then you're probably a Myriological Essentialist. The second approach is one of Myriological Nihilism, which can be a bit out there, but some find it quite appealing. According to the Myriological Nihilist, composite entities do not exist. The world may look like it contains macrophysical objects, but the reality is that there are only microphysical ones, atoms, or myriological simples. Accordingly, a seat per se doesn't actually exist. What exists are the atoms that comprise it. Things are divorced from their names, remarks the protagonist in Nausea. They are there, grotesque, headstrong, gigantic, and it seems ridiculous to say anything at all about them. I am in the midst of things, nameless things. By this view, the whole Ship of Theseus dilemma is almost a moot point. The Ship of Theseus didn't really exist even at the start. It is only the approximate term which we give to the aggregate of a specific set of particles. Ship 1 is a different ship from Ship 2, sure, which is a different ship from Ship 3, not just because the myriological simples have changed, but more importantly, because the ships aren't proper objects to begin with. As Thomas Aquinas surmises, simple things are neither divided nor divisible. Composite things do not exist when their parts are divided, so existence stands or falls with individuality. In line with this, if you're very existentialist, you're probably going to like this approach, and following the Myriological Nihilist, render the whole problem as one of atomism. The Ship of Theseus dilemma, though, does not stop here. No sir, it does not, for the philosopher Thomas Hobbes later wondered how it would change the problem if some man had kept the old planks as they were taken out, putting them together afterwards in the same order, and had again made a ship of them. So, Hobbes asks, what if there was a new ship, Ship X, built from the discarded original parts of Ship 1? Well, that certainly does complicate things. Let's look at how it affects Myriological Essentialism, for example. More particularly, what a Myriological Essentialist would say at the end of the repair process. By this point, Ship 4, comprised entirely of new parts, would have a Ship X as a counterpart, consisting entirely of the original parts. Assuming that every single shaving of wood from Ship 1 is now a part of Ship X, the Myriological Essentialist might say that Ship X has a reasonable claim to be Theseus' ship, a far better claim than Ship 4, or even Ship 2 in fact. Hobbes' Ship X also complicates things for someone who wants to say that having half the same oars is sufficient. Ship 3 has 15 of the original oars, or 50% of them, but its Ship X counterpart would have precisely the same amount. Can we say in this instance that both have equal claim to be Theseus' ship? Can there be two ships of Theseus at once? These sort of complications show that the dilemma is far from resolved, and hopefully excite some thoughts and intuitions on other approaches you could take. We see cases like the Ship of Theseus surprisingly more than we think. Take Shinto shrines like Isejinju in Japan. They're entirely rebuilt every 20 years owing to the philosophy of impermanence. The Nike shrine has been rebuilt over 60 times, but there is a purported continuity due to the wood all coming from the same sacred forest. A banal and somewhat humorous second example is the Sugar Babes, a band formed in the late 90s which famously underwent such extensive lineup revisions over the years that eventually no original members remained. And even in fiction we are regularly exposed to issues of continued identity. Orleans in Asimov's Foundation series, General Smith in Poe's The Man That Was Used Up. The Tin Woodman in Frank Baum's book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, for instance, is the way he is from gradually replacing all his lost limbs with tin. In one of the sequels, he even confronts a version of him made from all his discarded flesh parts, as to which has better claim to be the true Nick Chopper. Sound familiar? From this, we can see that the Ship of Theseus is not just a problem in metaphysics, but rather a problem for change and continuity in general. Understanding it is consequently of great importance to appreciating the richness of the issues around us. Next time you revisit a familiar place, perhaps you'll wonder what parts of it have changed, and whether enough of it has for it still to be the same place. Remember, Myriological Essentialism and Nihilism are just two of the many approaches that one can use to help tackle the dilemma. There are plenty more. In a way though, it ultimately comes down to your intuitions. Take another look at our handy key and really think, what do you feel constitutes identity? And accordingly, which ships do you think are the same? And I'm afraid that is the end of the video. It was quite heavy philosophical content this time, so if you made it to the end, well done. Please reward yourself by liking this video. Seriously though, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. It's free and a great way of helping more people see our content. If you've already subscribed, thank you very much. A great way to continue supporting the channel is just by checking out our other videos. I've linked some more of the metaphysical ones here, but don't forget there's plenty more on the channel page with a variety of different subjects. Please explore. Remember to hit that notification bell as well so that you know whenever we release a new video. As always everyone, thank you for watching.